Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this exclusive session, Innovations in Manufacturing, How to Become Your New Tech's Master, presented by Manufacturing Technology Today and sponsored by Aggregage. I'm Tara, the webinar coordinator for Manufacturing Technology Today, and I'm so excited to bring you this new event with such incredibly well-earned insight into how to make digitization and new manufacturing tech work for you. I'm really looking forward to speaking with Gary Minchell today and what I'm sure is going to be a valuable and illuminating conversation. Also, we will be recording this webinar in case you have to leave early, and it will be sent to you within 48 hours. We're going to send the link to the landing page in the chat box right now so you can make sure your email is entered. Up next, I do want to go ahead and thank Aggregage for sponsoring this webinar and helping us to make all of this happen. Started and run by a successful group of digital media entrepreneurs, Aggregage is reimagining and building out the next generation of business media in a way that meets the needs and expectations of today's business professionals and B2B marketers. Using social media, machine intelligence, smart algorithms, and big data, Aggregage's ever-growing portfolio of industry sector-focused verticals delivers the most engaging and relevant content to each industry's professionals. To learn more, visit www.aggregage.com. Up next, let's get some technical things out of the way. Please feel free to ask questions during today's session. You can do so by submitting them into the questions panel on the right side of your screen. Great questions always make for a great webinar, so don't forget to stick around for our Q&A session near the end of the hour to get even more insight from Gary. My wonderful colleague Ray Vaughn will be fielding your questions today. She'll be happy to answer anything technical you might have, so pull up the questions panel, say hello, let her know that you're listening. Lastly, if you do have any audio issues during today's presentation, you may choose to dial in by phone. You can do so by selecting the More button in the upper right portion of your screen and then selecting the Switch to Phone option. The numbers are on screen, but Ray Vaughn can relay them to you at any point if you need them. Up next, today we'll be hearing from Gary Minchell. Gary spent 25 years working in manufacturing, product development, and marketing. Following that were 15 years in the media business covering technology and the companies developing and using it. Gary is now an independent blogger and analyst over at themanufacturingconnection.com. He writes about what's happening along with thoughts and context, trying to understand where we're going. Gary also advises people and companies. So Gary, with that, I'm going to step out of the way and pass everything over to you.
Well, thank you, Tara, and thank you for everybody joining in. Hopefully I can provoke a few thoughts along the way, and be sure to put questions and comments into the question section, and I will answer what I can and respond to comments later as the needs require. Appreciate it. Starting out, I'm a follower of Cal Newport. Cal Newport is MIT computer science PhD, who now is a professor at Georgetown, but he's mostly known for a book he wrote called Deep Work. And he leveraged that into a podcast called Deep Questions. And I've been listening to that podcast. I recommend it right after mine, of course. But anyway, it's very good. And I was thinking about Deep Questions. And I put on the slide, technology or human, and we could think about that as we go through what do we do. And we're going to talk about disruption, innovation, people, transformation, big words, but try to put some context into it. My focus for a long time has been how to apply technology wisely. I love playing around with tech. I used to build my own computers back in the day when you could build your own computers. And I love playing with different programming languages and applications. But when I needed work to get done, I wanted an application that got out of the way and just helped me get my work done. And I think that's what we all want today in industrial manufacturing production space that we're all in. If you've been around for very long, you've gone through a lot of different things. You went through the PC-based control wars versus PLC, and we saw what happened, and that kind of went away. The field bus wars, the wireless wars, and then we got industrial Internet of Things, and phrase data as the new oil and digital everything. And now, as engineers and leaders in the operation side or the technology side of manufacturing, we're supposed to be also helping to lead business transformation using all these digital tools. So I was thinking, trying to come up with more deep questions. How do we use digital transformation technology wisely? How do we avoid being fooled by randomness? One of my pet phrases these days. And the lessons I've learned after a lifetime in the market is that technology is best when it's invisible, and we'll think about that. So hopefully I raise some more questions and just like disgorge a bunch of ideas, some of which may stick and get you thinking about what's going on. Oops. We're going quickly here on my PowerPoints. I haven't used PowerPoint in I don't know how long, so this is going to be an interesting exercise in backtracking and technology. About 25 years ago, I started writing, reporting, and so on about technologies and so on, and I'm at the end product of marketing people, and I became a trade magazine editor, and I get press releases. I still get tons of press releases daily, and I get a lot of phrases. I'm starting to notice some repetitive things about these phrases and see if you can place any of these. This quote provides procurement and operations teams from senior management to frontline workers with actionable and interactive reporting capabilities and just dashboards. Or manufacturers can leverage business intelligence to implement better decision making for streamlined and strategic material management. Or users gain increased clarity and materials visibility to view, filter, export, and share reports, enabling decision making that leads to improved business performance and bottom line savings. Another one, procurement and operations teams are working in silos and frequently in conflict and traditionally misaligned goals, limiting execution at scale. We empower these groups with visual and actionable reporting and analytics to drive alignment and add a new level of collaboration and strategic decision making. And to top all this off, we keep hearing about this will boost IT/OT convergence. I've heard these for years, and one of the problems of getting old, amongst many, are that I'm hearing this now for second generation, third generation kind of time. And so I'm wondering, have we ever solved those problems? Are we still solving them? What are we solving? What are the problems? What are we trying to do? So we'll just kind of take a look a piece at a time at different kinds of things. So why do we want to consider the ramifications of technology in manufacturing businesses, whether we're in factory automation, process businesses, manufacturing batch, whatever your particular business is, why are we doing this? Is it a 21st century problem? I'm going to talk about the 19th century to begin with. In the 19th century, European powers were busily building empires in Africa and Asia. The United States grew its empire, so to speak, across the North American continent. Then gold was discovered in California in 1848, leading to the 1849 gold rush, the 49ers. Thousands of people flowed into Northern California in search of their fortunes. Well, this led to a communication problem. Most of the US population was east of the Mississippi River, and many of these people had friends, relatives, whatever, who had moved across the continent, and they would like to know, how are they faring out there? Are they making their fortune? Are they still alive? Sending mail was a non-trivial manner. To solve that problem, on April 3rd, 1860, the Central Overland California and Pikes Peak Express Company, actually called the Pony Express, was formed, and it began operation, and it revolutionized the movement of information by transporting letters from St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento, California, about 1,500 miles in only 10 days. But on October 21st, 1861, Western Union spliced its eastern and western wires together and created the first transcontinental telegraph network. 3 days later, after less than 19 months in operation, the Pony Express went out of business. Another lucrative business wiped out in almost an instant with the introduction of a new and better technology. Well, now it looked like Western Union had everything going for it. But hobbyists and tinkerers and other people were working on a new technology to take those electric wires and actually send voice over it instead of da 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 da, Morse code stuff. And they're trying to figure out a good way to send this voice over the wire real time. Only 25 years or thereabouts after Western Union displaced the Pony Express, Alexander Graham Bell invented a working telephone. Well, now he's got a telephone. He needs to start a business. To start a business, he needs investors. In the 1880s, it's the same as in the 2030s. If you're going to start a business, you need money. So where's the logical place to go? He went to Western Union. After all, they were in the communication business. But they thought they were in the telegraph business, and they turned him down. Just think, what became AT&T could have been Western Union. But where are all of them today? The widespread deployment of electronic data communications began with Western Union. Yet even today, data communications continues to accelerate and displace companies. Landlines replaced by mobile. Mobile succeeding one device after another. And then technologies, 3G, 4G, LTE, 5G, 5G private networks. Now I've heard talk of 6G. In fact, I've read a little bit about it. Where's it going to go? We just keep displacing more and more and more, faster, faster, faster. The world of smart manufacturing, to bring it home to us, and Industry 4.0 and digital transformation, digital twins, and so forth, is causing headaches for executives whose boards read about this stuff, but they're not sure how to proceed. I've been getting a lot of recent surveys of executives and managers and what their expectations are, and they expect to move their companies toward these new worlds of manufacturing, mostly by employing new products. But the surveys were all done at the behest of product companies. So the question becomes, do we just need new products, or do we need something else? Another deep question. We need to explore why 30 years of new products haven't brought about solutions to all these problems that we've been trying to deal with since I was entitled The Kid in Engineering, and we were trying to solve manufacturing problems in the late 1970s. So the question becomes, is digital new? In order to stave off business disruption, a concept called digital transformation, it's being pushed by consultants, analysts, suppliers, probably even on my website. These are supposed to be a new strategy, but it's not. It's a continuation of a process begun many, many years ago. Technology improves, tools improved, ideas spread, but we're still solving the same problems we've had almost since the dawn of manufacturing. There was a manufacturing company serving a loyal customer base, and we had a product line with many variations on a theme. This made the bills of material involved and complex, and there were two problems. For engineering, maintaining an accurate bill of materials as it transformed from designed to as built in a company where changes were allowed to be made on the fly. That was my problem. I was in charge of that. For administration, the problem was maintaining an accurate cost of goods sold as well as accurate inventory control. I reported to the VP of product development and he put me in charge of engineering data. That was in 1976. We think putting somebody in charge of data is a new thought. Not so. We decided in 1978 we had the tools that we could improve our process and accuracy. We had an IBM Series 3 mini computer, and it was used as a database for mailing list. And we thought we could transform this to a Management Information Services Department, MIS, which evolved to IT. And my boss thought it was time to expand our company and doing all that kind of stuff, and he put me in charge of that process. And I did some research, and we had an IBM mini computer. I researched and got an IBM application, if you will, that was the beginning of what was then called materials requirements planning, and it became resources planning, and it became MES, and it became MOM, and we keep having three-letter acronyms to do the basically same thing. So with the application that I leased, we didn't buy those things, of course, just kind of like today. I went off to IBM school, and IBM taught me a lot of things in the brief couple of years that I worked on this project until economics happened, and we had to end the project and my employment. But anyway, IBM taught me a number of things that are still useful even to this day. The first thing is, excuse me, get your manual process right first. Don't bring computers in first, bring manual processes in, rationalize your manual processes for improvement, then digitize your data, and then make your data serve your processes and your business needs. I've spent the last 25 years interviewing technology providers and users, and I'm amazed how often they bypass this system, and much to their chagrin. Let's talk a little bit about innovation right now, briefly, and moving on as I throw out more ideas. They laughed at Columbus and they laughed at the Wright brothers, but they also laughed at Bozo the Clown. So make sure what you're doing is workable. I was playing around with these bills of material and computers and beginning a journey of what's called digital transformation. And I went to work for a company called Cardinal Production Equipment. We made automated assembly machines. Our biggest customer was GM, General Motors. When we visited customer sites to talk about problems they had and perhaps we could build a machine to solve their problem, what we saw were engineers who had built labs with the new, this is in the 80s, with the new PLCs and networks. They could tinker, try them out. They'd run wires from their office out to the plant and see what worked and see what didn't work, and were very innovative. And I learned later that these same engineers would then talk to their suppliers, be it a Rockwell or a Siemens or whoever, and give them ideas that became new products from the technology providers. So I was really thinking about innovation and this kind of thing, and I read a book called Anti-Fragile by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, and you can tell the value of a book by how often you reread it and how many new ideas you get every time you reread it. And I've reread this one several times. And he was talking about, now Taleb takes an adverse stance toward academics and professional scientists and professional technologists, if you will, and he really sides with probably you all who are practitioners and just trying to solve problems out in the field. And he says that knowledge formation, even when it's theoretical, takes time and some boredom and a freedom that comes from having another occupation. And as he looked through all this and did some research, he discovered something interesting, that the two main sources of technical knowledge and innovation in the 19th century and the early 20th century were the hobbyist and the English rector. or vicar. The extraordinary proportion of work that came out of the rector, the English parish priest, with no worries, erudition, a large or at least comfortable house, domestic help, a reliable supply of tea and scones with clotted cream, and an abundance of free time. And of course, optionality. The enlightened amateur, that is. Consider the Reverends Thomas Bayes, as in Bayesian probability, Thomas Malthus, Malthusian overpopulation, are the most famous. But there are more. Try the Reverend Edmund Cartwright, who invented the power loom, contributing to the Industrial Revolution. The Reverend Jack Russell bred the terrier. The Reverend William Buckland was the first authority on dinosaurs. The Reverend William Greenwell invented modern archaeology. The Reverend Octavius Pickard Cambridge was the foremost authority on spiders. Reverend George Garrett invented the submarine. Reverend Gilbert White was the most esteemed naturalist of his day. And the Reverend M.J. Barclay was the top expert on fungi. And Johann Jensen of Jensen's Inequality, which provides the major technical support behind the ideas of anti-fragile, was an amateur mathematician, never held an academic position. Let's take a look at Industrial Revolution technologists, like the steam engine, the one artifact more than anything else that embodies the Industrial Revolution. There was a blueprint to build a steam engine from Hero of Alexandria in ancient Greece, but it took a couple of thousand years almost before what the writer calls created by uneducated, often isolated men who applied practical common sense and intuition to address the mechanical problems that beset them and whose solutions would yield obvious economic reward. So the main technologies that came to jump into the modern world in the textile industry really had nothing to do with pure science. In 1733, John Kay invented flying shuttle, which mechanized weaving. In 1770, James Hargreaves invented the spinning jenny, which, as its name implies, mechanized spinning. These major developments in textile technology, as well as those of Wyatt and Paul, the spinning frame in 1758, Arkwright, the water frame in 1769, presaged the Industrial Revolution, and yet they owed nothing to science. They were empirical developments based on trial and error, experimentation of skilled craftsmen who were trying to improve productivity and profits of their companies. My point, even today, with all this advanced technology, innovation for the future comes from you, tinkering with software, networks, compute platforms, whatever it might be, trying to solve the problems that bedevil you. Moving on a little bit to another section we need to think about, and that's data. I listen to a wide-ranging number of podcasts, and one is a guy by the name of Peter Attia, A-T-I-L-L-A, M.D., and he discusses the science of longevity. If I'm old, I'd like to be a little longer. And he was talking about sleep tracking devices, and he says, sometimes the data is helpful. Sometimes it just causes anxiety, which in turn interferes with sleep. The marketing machines of various technology suppliers to industrial manufacturing market fixated on data for at least the last 6 to 8 years, probably even longer. As long ago as 15 years ago, I used to have conversations with an executive at what is now Schneider Electric about what we could do with more data coming from our production plants. He would say, Gary, if only we could replace cheap sensors all around a plant, we would have the data we need for better control and optimization. And thinking more broadly than just the control of a discrete, well, discrete's a bad word, but of an individual process, he was thinking broadly about putting units together and maybe managing and controlling a plant and maximizing productivity, profitability, and effectiveness of a plant. very interesting thought, but that would be a lot of data. And this leads to a piece of advice from W. Edwards Deming, somebody I followed since I was a quality manager in the early 80s, very early 80s, who pointed out the ultimate purpose of collecting data is to provide a basis for action or a recommendation. In a rush for developing and deploying new technologies, sometimes we forget about why we're doing it. Remembering that observation from Peter Attia about causing more stress, Nassim Taleb, who I already have talked about, said, we'll eventually get so much data, we'll drown in it. I can't believe that's still true after 20 years of writing about this, quoting suppliers who provide solutions to solve this problem, but we are drowning in data, not as an enterprise, but silo by silo. A larger enterprise comprises several or many production areas. A production company may have upstream, midstream, downstream components all built up over time with their individual databases that were built by this engineer and then that engineer and so on. A manufacturing company has machines built from a variety of OEMs, and maybe each line has an engineer who brought in a server to get the data that that engineer needed, and then there's many of them in a plant. And then another case, many companies have grown by acquisition. I've talked to several of the engineers on those, and each new company brings in its own manufacturing history of databases and servers and context and so on. So fighting all this is a huge task, and we're still fighting it, right? Automation suppliers figured they could be the repositories of all this, but with their automation, but it seemed to be lacking a little bit. And in the 2010s, I started working, I noticed that the IT suppliers moved in, and the IT suppliers thought that they could solve the data problem. And so we had the Internet of Things, and they had Internet of Things departments at Dell and HPE, and they had gateways and the compute platforms called Edge, and then the Edge to cloud, and we had all this IT infrastructure coming, but that didn't seem to solve anything either. It could have, but the adoption got to be too slow for the IT companies. And then we have web services, Amazon Web Services. Who'd have thought Amazon would make a big chunk of its money off of selling servers, time, space, whatever. And Google Cloud and Microsoft Azure and that sort of thing. And so a whole infrastructure is building up between both the automation companies and the IT companies and trying to solve this data problem. So recently I was at the ARC forum in Orlando, and I got to listen to a person called Chris Glenn of Phillips 66, and he had an enterprise project that was pretty interesting. Corporately, they realized they needed consolidated data in order to solve complex business challenges. And they realized that the data was in many silos. Matter of fact, when they investigated, asked questions and so on, they had operations data housed in 12 to 15 silos. Then there was the problem of context. Just bringing all the data together would solve nothing unless they could bring context with it. Security requirements raised their ugly head too, and they looked at having their own internal cloud and realized just moving the data would take years. They knew their business case, data would solve complex issues facing the enterprise. So they looked at requirements. Enterprise first, acquire real-time and interpolated data, use case driven, co-locate the operations data with business systems data, engineer ease of access, automate as much as possible, and they brought in a technology partner. In this case, the company was called Uptake, and they provided a secured, scalable move, and they used Microsoft Azure, which already housed their business system data. And the solutions met their current and future projected demand for storage. This whole solution reduced their runway by 12 to 18 months. Results were automated reporting and dashboarding. And when they talk about reporting, they've got regulatory reports and internal reports, all kinds of reports, and dashboards to help, as Deming said, provide a recommendation or an action. They had analytics that they couldn't have had before, simulation, improved ability to focus on corporate sustainability goals. So often I like to throw this little cartoon in here because how many of us have been in a meeting where something like this happens? It would have been easy at Philips for some corporate committee to get together and say, well, what if we don't change? Look at the time, expense, investment, and everything going into this project. What if we don't change at all and then something magical happens? I don't know, maybe somebody buys up or something makes it all go away. And that doesn't work too well. 20 years ago, I worked with corporate IT managers and talked to them, and they realized that they needed this operations data to fill their ERP systems to fulfill the promise that the ERP said that they would have. I guess before I get to workforce, I've got to take a little bit of time to talk about AI. If I don't talk about AI, you'll all wonder, have I been asleep for the last 20 minutes? Because it seems that fast, right? We were talking metaverse. We were talking about goggles and headsets and glasses, and Apple was going to come out with a glass. Facebook changed its name to Meta because of the metaverse, and all that was happening. And for years, I've tried on all these goggles and glasses and so on in different kinds of manufacturing examples or demos, but never in real life, a real life thing. Always cool. I love that. It's cool stuff. But then all of a sudden, well, and I should mention that we already had Alexa and Siri and some of that kind of thing too, which is a kind of an AI. We have AI built into a lot of the products we use in industrial. We don't even maybe realize it. But all of a sudden, Chat GPT. I recently wrote an article for an Italian magazine. I write a monthly column over there. And I was scanning for, it was for the article I had to write this month for in another month or two. And well, okay, what's the latest thing? It's called News from America. What's everybody talking about in America? We're talking Chat GPT. Deep question. Do you know what Chat GPT is? Have you tried it? What do you think you'll use it for? Things to think about. Chat GPT, originally, it works on a statistics model, not a logic model. It's not an if then else or either or kind of thing. It works on statistics and it just looks ahead. You give it a prompt and it'll look at words, and then statistically you say, okay, what is the most logical word that comes after this word? And then because it's got this huge database it can look at, machine learning, it'll piece it together, and it can do as marketing guru Seth Godin says, it can do a good job at being mediocre. It can be a mediocre thing to put together something like this. We used to have search, Google, Bing, whatever. I use Ecosia, but it gave you a list of links, which, by the way, if you notice how they really aren't any good anymore, but Google would give you links and then you click on them and you'd see if it was any good or not, and you could just keep clicking links, and sometimes you'd have to go 17 pages in before you got the really good ones. But with ChatGPT, it can also do search, but it's going to search words, and it's going to search text, and it's going to give you back some kind of a text block of things, and you're not going to know if that's true or not. You're not going to know if it's just more, if it just picked up a lot of false stuff coming or whatever like that. It's a bit of a problem, and I was thinking, okay, what can we use it for, and what good will it be? And then it's not going to be like Alexa that says, you ask it a question and say, what's the temperature outside, what's the humidity outside, turn on the light on the living room, that sort of thing. And you can't do that with ChatGPT yet. And then just in this last few days, I saw where Google intends to add code to its GPT that includes logic. So that'll enable if then else or turn on, turn off binary things. That could be interesting as people do that. And then we can combine the statistics model with the logic model. Maybe we can do something interesting. And I'm still thinking about that when just yesterday, as I'm trying to wrap up this presentation and get it ready to talk about, I saw a quote from, or a post actually on LinkedIn from Russ Fadell. He was one of the people with ThingWorx that sold to PTC not too awful long ago. And he's with a new company called Augmentor. And he says, everything about ChatGPT is thought-provoking. At Augmentor, we are working with generative AI to more effectively close the skills gap, really the experience gap, at the moment of need for production and service workers. We do not see this reducing the frontline workforce. Rather, we see it enabling companies to do more with what they have, a critical capability in this constrained workforce era. So where we're thinking about, how are we going to use this? How are we going to use this? We have a company that I just happened to come across, and I knew that Russ had gone with a new company, but I hadn't gotten much information about it yet. Interesting use. Maybe you can think of some things you can use ChatGPT for, or when it gets this logic engine from Google, that could be interesting too. I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet. As I sit there, I wonder how Russ's company is going to do this. Let's talk about workforce briefly and some of the time we've got left, because I think workforce is where it really is at. When I was part of a group that started Automation World, and when I was laying out the editorial, I said, well, one of the things I want to write about is lean. So I talked to 2 or 3 lean manufacturing gurus, and they said, why do you want to talk to us? We hate automation. That can't be too strong about that. And I said, well, what do you mean you hate automation? And they said, well, you replace jobs, and we're people oriented. We respect people. We want to make people more productive. And I said, wait. Automation also provides data. Remember data? And if you're doing a lean project, data is your friend. And if you can get better, faster data, that will help you. And they bought it. And I wrote several articles about lean. And the reason I bring lean up is I mentioned I'm getting a lot of survey reports lately. And I just got a survey report from an organization called Industry Reimagined 2030. And they released a research report called The State of Lean Manufacturing. And this report aims to, not to go too overboard, it wants to vastly increase company adoption by equipping practitioners, external experts, and educators with compelling facts, insights to make lean highly relevant, friendly, and compelling to the interests of concerns of mainstream manufacturers. They mentioned lean manufacturing continuously eliminates waste, bottlenecks, and improves customer value through employee engagement and utilizing data-driven tools. 74% of their survey respondents reported productivity gains of over 40% without intensive capital investment. They project or think that only about 10 to 15% of US companies systematically use lean and reap its benefits. This year, the president of this group basically said a company which is not continuously raising the bar is losing competitive ground. Lean solves many troubling problems facing US producers, raising the level of production capability and worker productivity without intensive capital investment. I am a lean believer, and I have visited many plants. Unfortunately, beginning with the pandemic, and since that time, I don't think I've visited a single plant recently, but I've been in many. I have seen how it works. Back to the collaboration thing, I have seen how good managers and leaders put people together so they can collaborate instead of maybe moving offices far apart where they never see each other again. So I've seen a lot of collaboration things. I want to briefly mention, I just recently interviewed a person called Ken Fisher. He's Senior Vice President of Product Management and Solutions Consulting at QAD. That's a software company, RedZone. His company was RedZone, was recently acquired just a few months ago by QAD. And what they do is workforce collaboration and connectivity solutions. And he told me that well, he really hit me over with OEE, and I kept saying, well, OEE is kind of a dicey measurement thing because the inputs into OEE can be so varied. And he said, well, we filter out a lot of things so that we make OEE at least a kind of a measurement tool and a comparison tool that's a little more realistic than if everybody just kind of did their own OEE. But he mentioned that a plant implementing a new MES may see a productivity improvement by as much as maybe 2%. He says a typical RedZone implementation results in about a 29% improvement. This is done by getting workers more involved and connected and collaborating with their work, with each other, and with the processes. He says it reduces administrative load on operators' data entry and gives voice to the operator using various chat and communications tools. Employee engagement is enhanced. I just recently heard how bad turnover is at a lot of Amazon places. Turnover is expensive. And if you can get people engaged and into the thing, oh, wow, what a marvelous thing that is. And the employee engagement and works in a lean culture, and they even have a skills matrix so you can find the additional skills that you need for if you need something else. I want to broach a book for you. I've talked a couple of books. I'll give you a picture of this one, Steel Toes and Stilettos. Interesting, I had to buy the book. What can you say? And I have a comment, transformation is hard. Steel Toes and Stilettos is a book that's written by two women, Shannon Carrolls and Kathy Miller. They were in an auto parts manufacturing company, and this book is a first-person account. Each one of the women wrote their own, so they'd have like a topic in the outline. Shannon would write her perspective as her role, and Kathy in her role, and it captures the story of manufacturing transformation, not digital necessarily, although that played a part, but it's the transformation of plants from losers that were about to be cut off to productive places that people enjoyed coming to, that were getting work done and people worked together and so on. But it was hard. And reading this book gives you the sense of what it took to get this done, what it took to get people involved, and what happened to those people that wouldn't get involved, and then the personal stories of how you juggle home life and doing a turnaround and all that kind of thing. Really worth a read. And if you have daughters or nieces or other people you know, and we want to get women more involved into our workplace, it's a great book to show them, to show that women can belong just like anybody else in manufacturing and make great accomplishments. Transformation, we might as well talk about transformation. This is, I just went looking for a couple of pictures, and I got an early Henry Ford Motor Company assembly, which actually I worked in places in the 80s and early 90s that were a lot dirtier than that, and a more modern manufacturing facility. And in my lifetime, we've gone a tremendous way in transforming our businesses, and yet we still have a long way to go. And I'm kind of looking into the future and thinking about where we're at, where we're going, what's happening in the market. We've had tremendous consolidation in the automation supplier market, and another thing that I mentioned, we're still trying to solve the same problems that we had before. And it's kind of like, regardless of where all this goes, when we look at it, we say humans or technology. Well, in the end, it's what? It's going to be humans solving business and operations problems using technology that's preferably transparent. Like I said, that technology is best that is transparent to the user. Transformation, it's up to you. You can go out and do it. Innovation, you can do that. I hope I showed a few examples that might get you thinking like, hey, I can go back, I can give a little bit of thought, I can tinker, and I can come up with a better way of doing whatever it is you're doing out there to solve that problem. Disruption, hey, go be a disruptor in a good way. You know, it's easy to be a disruptor just as a negative force, but there are people that see better ways to do things and figure out leadership to get things changed. You know, don't be Western Union still doing your telegram when Bell is talking with his voice, that kind of thing. What can you do to go next? Involving people. We involve people just starting with you. Each one of us, as we involve more people and collaborate and help somebody along and help bring somebody in and so on and involve people. So it all starts with you. I have one last slide. It's a busy slide, but Seth Godin is a guru that I really like, and many of these things on his list I have written about over time. He did a really nice list because that's what he does. He's a genius. And let me just kind of run through these really quickly as we kind of wrap up toward the end of time here. But these are genius. So we'll just take a look, you know, at practical things. Warm up the machines that take a long time first. Stress test the go, no-go parts of the project as early as possible. If the cost is low, replace dependent processes with parallel ones. Do the difficult parts when energy is high and the budget hasn't been depleted. Ship before you run out of time or money. Let me repeat that. I've seen that happen too often. They delay shipping. Ship now. Invest in slack buffers for any critical dependent components. Budgets are a tool, not a weapon. Thrash early, then lock down decisions and don't change them. Assign each task to the least expensive, least busy people able to get the job done. Probably not the project manager. Prioritize feedback from people with taste, skill, and influence, not proximity or volume. I think that one is a marvelous thing to do. Identify go, no-go points based on irreversible actions or unrecoverable costs. Anticipate the difficult and high-risk moments in advance and reserve resources for the ones you can't anticipate. And the last one, heroism is more fun, but less reliable than good planning. I hope I've given you a few things to think about, and I don't expect that you run right out and do any of these. I've been to too many conferences with some guru speaker that tries to get you all charged up and you leave and don't do anything. A lot of ideas, be an innovator, be a disruptor, involve people. And as Seth would say, go raise a ruckus, go help your company make a profit and have a more enjoyable time at work for yourself. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And Tara, if you're still there, I haven't checked the chats or the questions, so I don't know if we have any or not. Anything coming up to talk about?
Yes, Gary, thank you so much. So much information, so well done. Thank you so much for that. Before we do dive into our questions, I just want to remind everyone that now is the time to get straight from the source insight from Gary. And again, great questions always make for a great webinar. So don't forget to submit yours. And lastly, we understand if you need to run, just know that today's session is being recorded and will be emailed to you within the next 48 hours. If we don't get to your question today, you can always connect with Gary via the channels on screen. Gary, I'll have you go to the last slide for us.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it.
Perfect.
It's
Thank
almost like I'm a PowerPoint newbie these days. I don't know.
All right, with our remaining time, we do have some time for a few questions that came in. Our first question is coming in from Michael. We touched on this a little bit, but how does sustainability fit in with new tech and innovation? This is something our company is trying to figure out and work to implement.
Oh, that's a good question. I didn't even think about putting a slide in for sustainability. And everybody is doing some of these things. So I would go back to some of the, um, I can approach this so many different ways. I'm filtering out my options right now. So if you have any kind of lean, I always look at lean in various ways. And one is reduction of waste. And that's one reason I like lean is because one of the focuses is how do we reduce waste. I've been writing lately on Honeywell primarily, but some ABB and some other companies. Rockwell has been trying this. So you can actually go to some of these companies, depending on what business you're in. Honeywell has some products for finding methane leaks if you're in a process plant. In fact, there are other ones that'll do that. So there are technologies for finding leaks, which are something else. Tuning a process properly is really great for sustainability. There's carbon capture things coming along that technologies which evolve into products that are useful too. Otherwise, I would handle it like a project, and that is you need to find out, kind of step back, take a look. Okay, what's our process from stuff coming in to stuff going out, and what kind of processes do we have in the middle that transform materials from here to there? And where are the losses along the way? In certain plants, losses may be gas. In other plants, I had a job one time where part of my job was cost reduction, and we used a lot of sheet aluminum, and we wasted a lot of sheet aluminum. And so the boss would send me around every once in a while, say, "Hey, Gary, you know, take the next 2 weeks and go out to the plants and figure out, is there a way we can use like the offal when they cut out a section of aluminum, and can we use that for something else?" And just simple things like that to make better use out of the materials. So I don't know. There's a lot of stuff coming. A lot of people are working on it, and that's the way I view it. And I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, Tara. I don't know.
Oh, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Gary. And thank you for such a good question as well. If there are any follow-ups, feel free to go ahead and get those in the chat, or again, reach out to Gary after today's session. Moving right along, we have an interesting question coming in from Shanza. What's one skill you think would make for the most successful career in manufacturing? Would that be innovation?
The biggest skill is curiosity, and it leads to you'll be innovative if you're curious. So I'm curious about, now there are just a ton of them. I'm taking it as a basic thing that you've got some like basic math and whatever your particular function is. But curiosity is, Google used to hire on curiosity, and among, after you hit a certain base. So I would say that leads to innovation because you're curious about how things work and why it doesn't work and how I can make it work better. And you're curious broadly. So you don't just focus on, if you're a mechanical engineer, you just don't read about forces and thermodynamics. You're also listening to podcasts on health and wellness, and you learn about fitness, and maybe that leads to some idea on sustainability. Or you there's a lot of like chemistry things or different areas where you can pick up ideas because you're just incessantly curious. So that, to me, that's like the basics. And you can develop a passion for curiosity, and then you'll become innovative because you'll keep wondering, why can't I do that? what makes this better, and oh, I picked up an idea over here. So that's my recommendation on that.
Yeah, really good one. Makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Gary. One more question it looks like we have time for. Coming in from Dave. Do you have any thoughts on how to measure the success of new technology that we implement? Does it come down to ROI?
There are a number of things. So, and it depends on what industry you're in and that sort of thing. So, more broadly speaking, ROI is an important indicator. But what was the reason why we brought in that equipment? Was it to improve throughput? Was it to improve quality? So you can measure throughput, you can measure quality in various ways, and it may take some thinking on that. And certainly, the discounted cash flow and those financial models that fortunately I've long since forgotten, but since I used to have to do it. But those are measures too. But why, when you lay out the project and you're bringing in this equipment, there should have been a reason to do it, and then that should be measurable, and then you can go back and say, and even that Phillips 66 project was, they could go back and maybe couldn't really get an ROI. I don't know. I didn't ask the engineer there, but did it solve the problem that I was brought in to solve? Whatever it is. So it's kind of a vague answer, but I think it's got to be in a sense that it's why did you do it and did you solve that problem? And then hopefully when you did all that project, you had some measurement um, things set aside that would tell you if you did it or not.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gary. And yeah, thanks again for the great question. With that, that is all we have time for today. I hope you all learned half as much as I did. Thanks again to our sponsor, Aggregage, and Gary, a big special thank you to you for such a phenomenal session today.
Thanks a lot. Glad to do it. Glad to meet you.
A big thank you to all of you who joined us today. Again, I am Tara, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.